to another Inside the Recording Studio Tuesday tip. Today I'm going to be taking you through DI guitar recording setups. I'm going to show two examples, one with a clean guitar sound that's rather simple, and one with a rather complicated distortion setup. So let's get right to it. As you can see here, I have a singular channel strip setup. It is set up much like a guitar player would do in a hardware rig, in that there's a pedal board here that is in front of the amp head. And usually when you do that, you're running some sort of distortion or compression, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what I have here. I'm only using the compressor in this particular setup. I have it followed up with a Line 6 pod amp, which is the Silverface bass, otherwise known as a Fender Bassman. I have turned off their cabinet simulation, and I have followed it up with my own cabinet IRs from Redwirez Mix IRs. And then I have a Logic compressor following that as well, that is set up to be an 1176. Now let's take a quick look at the microphone setups that are going on here. In the first example, I'm using a Fender Deluxe Reverb cabinet. Actually, for all of these, I'm using a Fender Deluxe Reverb cabinet. And I've got on the first two blends, I have a C414 at the cap 3 inches, and I have an SM57 on the cone 4 inches out, and it sounds like this. And that's that sound. Now, the next blend that I have is also the Deluxe Reverb. This time I've got a U87 2 inches out on the cone, mixed with a Tab 57, which is like the SM57, cone edge 4 inches out, and it sounds like this. A little bit brighter, a little bit more mellow in the low end. The next one I have set up here is just a straight up room mic. It is a 4038 set up between the null and the wall so that you're getting the room sound without canceling itself out. So it's going to sound very spacey. And the next setup that I have is another blend of two mics. Again, still on the Deluxe Reverb cabinet, and we're looking at the use of a 421 3 inches out on the cap edge, mixed with a 4038 1 inch out off the cap, and it sounds like this. That's got a very bright top end and a very chunky low end for a clean sound. The next setup that I have is a KM84 1 inch off the cap, combined with a Royer 121 4 inches off the cone edge, and it sounds like this. And that reacts really well on the top end in terms of the compression to get a very poppy sound without overly spiking my ears. Very mellow on the mid and low. My last setup is three mics, and these three mics are a 441 12 inches off the cone, mixed with an SM7 right on the grill at the cap, and a Royer 121 off axis on the cap 2 inches out, and it sounds like this. So we've got a very bright top mid and top end on that without being super thunky in the low end. That is a way of going through various micings on a same cabinet with an amp head for a clean sound to get you a variety of different clean tones to choose from. Let's move on to the distortion. And here we have a very huge distortion setup. So let's walk through it real quick. First off, I have 5 channel strips going on here, all inside a folder that can be folded down to be the one control of the entire sound. But let's walk how I've got this sound going in the chain. Starting out, I have a pedal board and I've stuck no pedals in it. And the amp that I've chosen is the Fuchs Train 2 from plugin alliance by the wonderful folks over at BA. Now, I've turned their particular IRs off, and it's not because their IRs aren't any good. They're actually quite amazing. But instead, I wanted to do something very different in the setup that would be similar to how someone might multi-mic a particular setup in a studio. We're recreating that with a setup in the DAW. On my input channel strip, I've actually turned the output of that channel off so I don't get the actual amp head all by itself with no cabinet on it. And then I'm running it on an auxiliary output, and that output is these three channels right here, these three auxiliary channels taking their input from this output. And to start off with, let's break it down. I've got this first cabinet, and I'm actually lopping off all the low end. I'm running a high pass filter on it at a 1K frequency cutoff and a very steep slope. And the reason for that is I really just wanted to get the top end of this sound and get it really, really crispy. And that's what I get. All right. And I'm running this with a cabinet setup that is two different cabinets. I've got a Fender Twin, and on the Fender Twin, I'm miking it with an SM57 5 inches out off the cap, and I'm combining that with a Fender Bassman mic'd with a Royer 121 3 inches out off the cap. Now the cap is where we get our brightest sounds out of a guitar amp cabinet with whatever kind of mic, and the mics will impart their coloration. Now that is where I'm getting my top end. My low end is coming from the second cabinet setup. And here, I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm running a low pass filter cut off at the 1K mark. Again, a heavy slope. And that gets me kind of like this smile situation going on in the actual guitar range. The cabinet that I'm running here is a Vox AC30 with Blue 12s, set up with a C414 on the cap edge 4 inches out. And that gets me a real tight low end, so it's not real tubby. So I get a nice rich low end. And if I combine the two, I get a very crispy and very full kind of guitar sound without being muddy in the middle. Now to take it a step further, I've combined this with a room sound that's set up on this channel strip, and I've got a couple of plugins running in front of it to kind of enhance that room sound. And the first thing that I have is the Eventide Tricera Chorus, which is a great way to kind of just spread the sound out a bit in the mix. Then I'm following it up with the Eventide Ultra Tap, and the reason for that is I wanted to get a bit of slap going on in this room, and it didn't have it initially, so I'm adding it in. The cabinet that I'm running this through is actually two different mics, one panned left, one panned right. The left-hand mic is a KM84, and the right-hand mic is a TC30, and that sound gets me this. So it gets me this washy, chorusy, without being muddy, slappy kind of room sound that I can dial in to taste. And if I add all three of these together, we get... Now I can bring in more room sound if I really wanted to and really make that enhance the room vibe and a little bit less in your face. But I like it where I had it previously. Now, in addition to all of that, I've added a reverb sound to the first two cabinets because obviously the room doesn't really need to be adding the reverb, but the other two cabinets could. To start off with, let's hear what the reverb sounds like if it's just the top end of the cabinet or the top end sound. And it trails off. And then if we do the same thing with the low end, and together, combined, and as you hear, once the reverb tail kind of tails off, there's a pitch shifting going on. Now, this is the Eventide shimmer verb that I'm using for this, which gets a really nice lush kind of reverb. In addition to that, you can add pitch shifting and delays and other things going on, which is exactly what I did with this. I added a pitch shift that's an octave up. Then I added a second pitch shift that's 4 cents higher than that, just to kind of mingle with the sound a little bit. And then it's delayed an eighth note at the tempo that I'm at. And all together with everything, we've got this. Now, if I roll the volume knob on the guitar back, it cleans up a bit. So, and the cool thing about that is I can actually dial in the amount of top end, the amount of low end, and the amount of room sound just by playing around with the channel strip faders here. And once I'm all done, I can close it all down and control the overall volume of the entire guitar sound. With the bus fader here. There's a couple of DI guitar examples for you. We'll see you next time.